And good evening, everyone. Welcome to a special live chat that is brand new because we actually have a storm. Okay, it's now a snowstorm for everyone, but what I decided to do, I decided this during the weekend. I'm like, we actually have a storm here, and it's very interesting from a meteorological point of view. And also, there was a lot of poor use of mesoscale guidance that was suggesting intense snowfall for the New York City Metro. Now, I never advertised that, but that was certainly out there floating around. So I figured tonight would be a great night because we really haven't had many chances this year, certainly not during the winter. And of course, now we get into meteorological spring until we could actually get a storm like this. That is an actual phasing nor'easter. And it's still an impressive storm. It's just not a snowstorm for most of the region. For the northern interior, for the Poconos and Catskills, especially the Catskills, the Green and White Mountains, this is going to be a really impressive snowstorm. If this was a couple of weeks earlier, maybe about 4 weeks earlier, this would have been a real impressive storm for the northern Atlantic. But at the same time, I'm seeing some interesting observations right now. So I figure let's go over some of the observations. I'll take some of your questions. We'll go over the storm structure. It'll be a good learning experience. And I'll explain why you can't really use the snow maps, okay, in this type of scenario. So let's go dive to the data here. And here we are. So the first thing I noticed on our radar is the focus of this heavy precipitation. This is a little bit further east than what was forecasted last night. Last night, this band was supposed to be over the Jersey Shore and over New York City and then off towards Long Island. And the reason why it's further east is because the interaction of the shortwaves was delayed further by another 2-3 hours. So this storm in the subtropical jet stream, which you can see very nicely out here, is now a little bit further east. I don't know why there were some individuals earlier on today that were saying that the storm was further west. You had some phronogenesis that was further west, but the storm structure itself was either on track or slightly further east. So in this setup here, this is really cool what we're seeing with the water vapor. Okay, our storm is blossoming. It's right over the Gulf Stream. Okay, it's right around here. So it's feeding in on this thermal gradient here, right? So that's its own engine, and that's just with the subtropical jet stream by itself. So this is rapidly starting to organize, get itself together. See strong lifting here, sinking air behind it. Classic storm. And if this feature was even more slower, then this would be out in the Atlantic and no big deal at all. But because this feature here is starting to interact with this feature here, it's starting to slow down this whole pattern just a little bit, just enough to capture this storm and support the redevelopment of a new upper level low right around southern New England. And that is pretty much the only reason why we're seeing this storm. If this trough here was more of a positive tilt, if this trough here was more like this than like this, then this would be a non-issue. We wouldn't even be here, and we'd be talking about some passing showers, and that's about it. But because of that interaction, you can start to see this storm moving a little bit slower. Now, why isn't this storm further west? Why don't we have a chance for this to bomb out and produce heavy snowfall for the Philadelphia and New York City metropolitan areas? Well, let's step back for a second and pretend that it's not March, first of all. All right, we'll talk about that factor in just a moment. But let's just say this is the middle of January and we're having this. When you're taking a look at this pattern here, the first issue I have with trying to make this into a storm that is more for I-95 corridor is this feature right here, this trough. It's displacing this ridge. The whole pattern in the polar jet stream and subtropical jet stream is highly progressive. Now, you might say to yourself, Stephen, I thought there's high latitude blocking. I thought, the polar vortex got destroyed, and that means storms galore. Yes and no. Again, we talked about this earlier, where the majority of the influence of that polar vortex destruction was focused towards Europe and Asia. And so as a result, a lot of this is happening under the block. And the polar jet stream can remain amplified but continue to move. So basically what you have here is someone taking a rope, and when they go up and down with that rope and send the waves through, right, the sine wave through, that's what we're dealing with here, a progressive sine wave pattern where you're getting short wave after short wave after short wave marching through. The minute I saw this, I said to myself, and I've been saying to premium members, this is not a storm for us. This looks like a storm more likely for New England. And I stayed away from the idea of any type of significant winter weather event outside of the fact that it's in March and the temperatures are marginal. But because of that factor, that this storm is either going to miss or develop further east. And this is the reason why. What you want to see for a major winter storm, you want this trough locked in here. Because if this trough locks in here and doesn't move and doesn't keep on marching eastward, that forces this ridge to amplify. The more it amplifies, the more this trough is able to dig, and you get your upper level feature to dig down towards the Tennessee River Valley. And once you reach that point, game on. That is when you have all the green lights to go, and you have everything in place. You got the blocking in the Atlantic to slow down everything. You have the cold air in place, all that stuff. But in this case, we don't. Okay. But what about the cold air? Okay, fair question. Right now, this is our current surface. And here's our low pressure system organizing. Here's our polar trough. Shows up very nicely here on the WeatherTap radar and surface map, right? So that's all pretty clear, right? Our low pressure system storm developing, our low pressure system from the polar shortwave, and here's our shortwaves associated with that. This is our thermal gradient right now at the surface. Our freezing temperatures, our support for below freezing temperatures is all the way back in the Great Lakes. You can't get more marginal than the air mass that we have in place. This type of air mass in the middle of January poorly supports snowfall. You can see that pretty clearly here on our surface map. And we got temperatures in the 40s. We finally get 132 degree temperature right around the Catskills. And then you go all the way up to Binghamton. But even up towards the Finger Lakes, you have temperatures basically in the lower to mid 30s. But the 850 millibar temperatures are certainly supportive if it was January. And this is a good example of sun angle. Now, many of you guys already know this, okay? But there's some individuals who don't. So let's just go over this real fast. In January and February, your sun angle is much lower, okay? It's not as direct. So the power of the sun is not as impressive. This has an impact on the ability for the air mass to mix, okay, those 850 millibar temperatures down to the surface. So in the winter, a 0 degree Celsius temperature at 850 millibars will certainly support temperatures at the very least in the mid 30s, maybe even lower 30s, okay? And there's your snow and there's your storm, right? Perfect. However, when it's in March, because it's a more direct sunlight exposure, There's my sun right here coming in, mixing the atmosphere, warming the lower levels of the atmosphere. That 0 degrees Celsius temperature with precipitation now only supports 40s. What you need is for your 850 millibar temperatures to be around minus 6 degrees Celsius for this time of year. Now, I bring this up because of the snow maps that I've seen floating around all over the place. When you look at these snow maps on whatever website you want to use, the problem is that these equations, no matter which version you use, has a basic idea of QPF, QPF 850 millibar temperature multiplied by 10 or multiplied by 12 or multiplied by X, Y, and Z. Okay? But it doesn't take into account the temperatures at 925 millibars and the surface. This is why even in the middle of winter, what you want to do is take the QPF, that's your moisture output, and then you study your your temperature profile over the region. Does it take longer? Yes. Is it difficult? Yes. Is it more accurate? Yes. Because when you do that, then you can account for mixed precipitation, ground temperature, wind speed, the nature of the snow, whether it's a wet snow or a dry snow. The colder the atmosphere, the drier the snow. The drier the snow, the higher the snow ratio. The higher the snow ratio, the more snow can accumulate. In this case, it's reverse. Warmer atmosphere, higher snow ratio. So in this case, most of this isn't even accumulating, but where it is accumulating, like what we're seeing in the Poconos and the Catskills right now, it's probably a 6-to-1 to 8-to-1 ratio. It's the perfect type of snowfall for snowmen, snowball fights, stuff like that. It's very sticky, very clumpy, right? It really looks beautiful on trees and stuff like that. In fact, I've seen some beautiful pictures already. But the ratio is so high, okay? It's at such level at 6-to-1 that the amount of precipitation you're outputting is not going to equal the amount of snow that is being put out in the model guidance. So that's something that you have to consider when you're looking at these maps. You kind of have to throw them all out. They're trash. And 90% of that isn't even going to accumulate because it's going to be occurring during the middle of the day when the sun angle is going to kill that snowfall accumulation. Because that sun angle is going to be warming your surface. Where your air temperature is around 34, your surface is going to be 35, your snowflake melts on it. Unless it's falling very heavily. So, where we do have it cold enough, right around here, that is where we're starting to see a pretty good band of snowfall. And what you're starting to see here is a lot of divergence and diffluence. So let's zoom out here for a minute. Okay, so this is at 850 millibars. You see our 850 millibar low finally starting to develop. All day today, the 850 millibar low has been focused over the Great Lakes. Now it's finally focused over the coastal waters. So we're seeing a transition from the interior to the coast for the primary low. We're also starting to see at 500 millibars our trough getting closer and closer to the surface low. Divergence and diffluence set up. Our 700 millibar low is getting ready to shift towards the coastal waters. When this starts to really close off, our storm rapidly explodes. But we also know that it's going to be continuing to push east. Look at our ridge axis. Look at this. This is a really good signature here of suggesting the storm's going to continue to march northeast until it gets to about the Gulf of Maine, and that's where it slows down, does its little loop-to-loop. Let's see here. Now, I want to pull up, let's see, first thing is jet stream dynamics. Why am I pulling this up? Because this tells me where we're seeing the strongest circulation in the atmosphere. Notice this area lines up very nicely with our heavy rainfall. So what does this mean? Well, in the upper levels, we're seeing a lot of stretching in the atmosphere. And the atmosphere doesn't like to leave those holes. It's always trying to fill, right? So where is it going to fill that void? Well, it's not going to come from the top of the stratosphere because it doesn't work like that. Okay, the stratosphere likes to stay separate from the troposphere where we're at. So this stretching here leads to rapidly rising air, right where we have our heavy precipitation. And also right where we're starting to see rapidly cooling clouds. So here's our storm. Here's our divergence and diffluence between our upper level polar shortwave and our subtropical shortwave. This part of the storm is what we're going to be watching for, because what's going to happen is that this part here is going to start to pivot, and it's going to be pivoting around this feature here that's going to pinwheel. So we take a look at some of the other lifting parameters here. Another example of divergence and diffluence. You see the stretching in the atmosphere, the lifting that's going on. And then here's our deformation axis. Now, this is what's going to be really cool. Let me get out of this real fast. Okay. This is our deformation and stretching axis. This is stretching in the atmosphere. So what this is going to be doing is that as our storm starts to lift to the northeast and pivot, this feature here is going to pivot over Massachusetts and Connecticut and then set up from Massachusetts, New Hampshire and southern Vermont, Massachusetts, central Hudson River Valley, and right into the Poconos. And that's where you're going to get this intense band of snow as the storm lifts northward and pivots. And then it is this same feature that's going to drop south through the rest of the northern Atlantic, giving us our snow for tomorrow, but it's going to be weakening. So let's take a look at some of the model data involving that. Here we are, right here. Okay. So, here we are around midnight. Our upper level low captures our storm. Very strong lifting over much of southern New England. Starting to see divergence and diffluence very clearly. Here's our short wave in the subtropical gesturing getting captured. And by the morning hours, the low is completely captured. And you're starting to see that pivot that starts to show up. And then by the afternoon, there's your inverted trough support. Right here. The problem is that as this inverted trough is dropping south around the 700 millibar low, which is right here, as this process is ongoing, the whole storm is getting pushed east. So your best lifting associated with this event is getting pushed out. So by this point, yes, you have cold enough air, 850 millibars, but your temperatures are marginal at this point. In fact, during this time period, let's say around noon tomorrow, there's your surface temperatures. Cold enough at 850 for snowfall, but I bet your snow map didn't take into account for your temperatures being around 37 degrees. So tomorrow afternoon, snow will be flying in the air. Absolutely. You know where it's going to accumulate the most? On your grass, your car tops, and up here. This is where I have your best potential for your heavier snowfall. And that is where the latest HRR and NAM guidance is finally picking up on this. Now, you might be asking, Stephen, why was there so much support from the mesoscale models of snowfall down in the major cities? And why wasn't I buying it? Okay. What was happening with the mesoscale models was a term that we call convective feedback. What happens is that you have this setup here, okay, and you can see very convective precipitation here. But you have so much rising motion going on in the atmosphere that the scale of the model isn't able to handle it. So what happens is that it just kind of vomits convective feedback and rising air all over the place. And what you need to do is say, okay, we know where the upper level structures are, like where the 700 millibar low and the 500 millibar low and so on and so forth. By taking classes in physics and atmospheric physics and whatnot, and dynamics, you know where there should be sinking air. And so when you know where there should be sinking air, you're able to eliminate a lot of the noise. And so that is why when you're looking at the mesoscale models, sometimes they do a great job and they don't fall for that noise factor. But when they do, you have to be able to recognize it and say, okay, it's producing a ridiculous amount of snowfall. It's saying it's going to be 35 degrees in the middle of the day in March, but producing 18 inches of snow, and it's producing this bullseye over central New Jersey or New York City or Long Island when it shouldn't be there, because all that lifting and your jet streak dynamics, which we could look at right here, are all off to your east. Now, last thing I want to touch on is the winds, because I want to make sure I cover this. I'm not so much worried about the coastal flooding at this point, but I am worried about the winds. And the reason why is that initially this jet streak is really going to get its act together, not only on the Atlantic side, the main side, but also on the back end of this. And what happens when you get strong cold air transport and you get these type of winds, where we're talking about anywhere between 42 to around 65 knots, okay? There's going to be a lot of mixing in the atmosphere. And you combine this with a pressure gradient between the bombing low pressure system and the high pressure system over the Great Lakes, you get easily sustained winds of 15 to 30 miles per hour. But I'm very concerned about the gusts. Even along the coastal plain, I could definitely see gusts pushing 50 miles per hour, possibly 60. Obviously, you're going to see that in the Gulf of Maine with this jet streak here. But I think this feature back here during the afternoon and evening hours has a high potential of producing power outages. So I would be prepared for that. I would be prepared for a scenario where if you have anything loose out, I mean, even around Trenton, Philadelphia, Belmar, New York City, any of those locations, down to Cape May, you want to bring anything loose in because it's going to end up blowing down the street into your neighbors. Because I'm expecting some strong wind gusts as a result of this. The good news is that the worst of the wind gusts clears out pretty quickly. So we get a breezy day on Tuesday night into Wednesday, and then by Wednesday evening onward, we calm down. So expect windy conditions continuing from tomorrow night into Wednesday morning, and then we start to subside. And I think that pretty much covers it as far as my thoughts on this storm. Again, I updated the impact map this afternoon at 5:06 p.m. based on the observations that we're seeing and some of the model guidance that we're seeing. Again, your worst case, your biggest impact in terms of snowfall is going to be well to the north of the forecast area and northwestern Connecticut, where you're going to see 12 to 24 inches. It's going to be elevation dependent. Then you're going to see a really impressive tight gradient set up here. Zone 2, 6 to 12 inches of snow. I think many locations are going to be on that 6-inch side, but the higher you are in elevation, the more likely you're going to get closer to that foot. Zone 3, you're going to look at 4 to 8 inches. Again, most locations are going to be more towards that 4-inch side rather than an 8-inch side. But I really like where this is setting up. This is going to be a lot of snow and sleet around Scranton, but I think it will work out. Definitely touch 4 inches, could push up to 5. the higher you are around Scranton, like Mount Pocono, the more likely you're going to be pushing into that 8-inch level. And then below that, this also includes portions of Connecticut, 3 to 6 inches. This is where we start talking about roadways, about half that on the roadways. If they're treated, probably just remain wet. And then down towards Zone 5, this includes Long Island. This part right here, Zone 4 and 5, is going to be associated with our low pressure, with our back end of the storm coming through with snow intensity decreasing. Looking at 1 to 3 inches of snow on cold surfaces, grass, your bushes, car top, stuff like that. Trace to maybe an inch on some untreated roadways and sidewalks and pavement. Other than that, just wet pavement for the most part. If you have any type of treatment down, heck, if you have traffic going on, just wet. And then Zone 6 is pretty much rain, and then some flurries at the very end tomorrow. Again, watch out for some slick roadways, but other than that, nothing too significant. My primary concern in Zone 6 is going to be, again, the heavier rainfall that's pretty much has already occurred and will continue on through tonight, and then the strong winds for tomorrow. We're going to get a nice break tomorrow morning, by the way, around Philadelphia to New York City in terms of dry conditions, because as the storm is blowing up around Boston, we're going to get sinking air here as a result, as a byproduct of that. So that is where we stand with our storm. And let me just refresh the radar here while I answer all of your questions. Let me take a look and see. I know that we're pretty active here on the premium side. And we're very active over here too on the YouTube side. Okay, so let's answer some questions and rock and roll. Let's see what we got here. All right. This would be a great winter storm for New York City Metro in January, not March. Yes, I would agree. I think it would have a much better potential, although what we'd be talking about right now, if this was January, was the fact that your heaviest precipitation's all off the coast and the storm is pushing east. I'm guaranteeing that people will be flipping out about that because that adjustment is just a little bit further east. But because it's rain, no one really makes a big deal about it. Let's see. Reporting from Hunter for you. Also, how is everything going on? Subtropical jet stream is so strong that it is kneecapping the polar jet ridge in the west that otherwise would seem perfect place for a deep eastern trough. Yes, that is part of it. And by the way, that's going to be an interesting theme as we start to deal with more of El Niños taking shape. Premium members, I did write about that this evening for the long range thoughts. I'm not sure how strong El Niño will get just yet. But what I am willing to say is that the subtropical jet stream, it's going to be a powerhouse in the spring and the summer. And I think we're already starting to see that influence very clearly. And I think we're going to be dealing with, this isn't going to be the only rain event that we're going to be dealing with, I think, in the northern Mid-Atlantic. I think we're going to be very active this spring and into the summer. So it's something that's certainly to keep an eye on and see just how active this subtropical jet stream really is. Given how strong the subtropical jet already is, this is a perfect lead-in. It seems that El Nino actually impact on the subtropical jet stream could outperform the sea surface temperatures. Temperatures are weak to moderate, but the jet acts more like a strong El Nino. You know, part of this goes back to that influence of the volcano, and I'm curious what the vertical interactions that are going on between the QBO and the tropical circulation is having here, because this theme has been going on since last January, where our subtropical jet stream has been a little unusual. We saw that impacting the tropical season last year. We've seen it this winter, where it produced an El Nino-like influence during the middle of a La Nina winter. And it continues now. So what does that mean when we actually have an El Nino? I don't know yet, but I'm working on it. But I certainly think that it's going to mean a lot more moisture over the United States and a lot more rain events. And I'm starting to think we're going to see above normal precipitation, at least over the southern tier. We'll see if that works up into the mid-Atlantic. If only the polar shortwave trough was in Tennessee Valley and tilting negative to capture the shortwave off the Carolina coast. Yeah, I mean, it would be a totally different pattern. You'd have a completely different pattern in place, and you'd probably have colder air in place too if that was the case in that type of scenario. So yeah, I mean, it would be a totally different storm. If only the remnant of the 700 millibar polar vortex were over Hudson Bay rather than North Central Russia. Yes, if the whole pattern was different, it would have been a different storm, completely. Sun angle, even when there was heavy rain this afternoon, the ambient light out was fairly bright, far brighter than it would have been 2-3 weeks ago. Exactly. The best way to see the influence of the March sun, someone posted this on Twitter a couple of days ago, was when we had our previous snow event, and it was snow covered in the morning. By 9 a.m. the sun was out. Boom! It completely evaporated. And that's the power of the sun. That's what it can do. That's why in March, not only does it matter the track, the temperature profile, the location, the best lifting parameters, but now also you have to consider time of day. Because if the storm happens in the middle of the day, you need intense lifting to overcome that influence, or else you'll have plenty of precipitation, but none of it will accumulate. Great example of the importance of temperature profiles and layers was one recent winter where we had what would have been a good storm, but there was a layer of warm air somewhere around 900 millibars or so because of the placement of the low at the level. Yeah, okay. So what happens sometimes during transition storms like this, and I'll pull up an upper level map here. Let's say 850 millibars, okay? Now you can see the 850 millibar low off the coast here. It's starting to pull the cold air towards the coastal plain. Now again, if this was earlier in the year, this would be a big deal. But because it's so much later, you need this isotherm to reach us, which is going to take some time. But I'm pointing this out because sometimes you could have the surface low and the 925 millibar low repositioned towards the coastal waters, and your primary surface low is over the coastal waters, but your mid-level low is still hanging back here, which leads to the atmosphere not cooling as quickly at 850 millibars compared to the rest of the atmosphere, which can lead to sleet and rain rather than snowfall. So the timing and the process of the shift of those circulations is really important when you're dealing with these type of storms. And sometimes it can throw a real monkey wrench into your forecast. I think people have gotten really spoiled by the run of big winters, even in the bad years. It seems we got one big storm and forget just how tough it is to get a big snowstorm in the northern mid-Atlantic. There are some years, some stretches where you cannot buy snow. And then there's other years where you're willing to sell it to Alaska. You know, right now we're in a stretch of, I guess you could call it a snow drought. But there will be years, believe it or not, where we will be shifting to a much more active pattern. It's just a matter of time. With downsloping enhanced winds on the backside, it's something I'm watching out for around the Delaware River Valley, right around Trenton, and that potential is going to possibly show up around 3 to 6 o'clock tomorrow. So definitely watch out for wind gusts around that time period. Thoughts on the trend depicting healthier deformation zones swinging across New York City and Long Island? Okay, so that is pretty much the HRR guidance. So the deformation zone, if you're watching this evolution here, the precipitation shield, let's see if we can get a new, here we go. Let's see what the new HRR is doing here. Okay, so in this part here, your 700 millibar load should be right about here. So you're having some stretching in the atmosphere over the Hudson River Valley. And there is your band. Now notice it's starting to also indicate periods of rain in here as well. Okay, so what does that look like at the surface? Well, let's see here. We'll do surface temperatures around that time period. And let's see, again, this is around 1 p.m. This is supposed to be really intensifying, moving over the region. 36, 35, 37. Marginal. Definitely snowfall on grass. I like that idea. Let's see. 925 millibar temperatures. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so your gradient is here. In the dead of winter, this would suggest maybe some sleet mixing in. In March, this would suggest some rain mixing in. You're probably going to get a pretty good band here. So it would be a scenario where you get snow, rain, sleet, snow, rain, kind of mixing back and forth depending on the intensity of the precipitation. And then at 850 millibars, it shows up even better. So you're getting warm air punching in from the Atlantic, you cold air wrapping in behind it. Let's see what the dry air. Let's see if we got 700 millibar. I think. Do I have 700 millibar relative humidity on here? I don't. All right, so I'll look for another factor here. Let's try relative humidity. And then we'll try water vapor. Okay, so here's our precipitable water value. And you're having dry air punching into the back here. Let's see what it looks like on the water vapor satellite depiction. Okay, this tells me a lot. All right. So if this is accurate, your strongest lifting is here. You have strong substance here. You got a weaker band here, but your strongest lifting is clearly back here. So this is likely a light to moderate band, not a heavy band. I mean, you'll probably see some bursts here and there based on the thermal gradient, but your strongest lifting here, the reason why this is so important, this signal here and this signal here, is because you're rising so much air, the air must slam to the surface. And so this crushes it and suppresses it. This is a very important signal here. Potential for surprise problems during the evening commute. I think that the evening commute will feature slick road conditions, but again, the temperatures are so marginal during this time period. A lot of locations are above freezing. What does the weather look like for the Mets home opener? I have no idea yet. The sun angle today is equal to the sun angle in the last week of September. That's true. Rain right now in the mid-Hudson River Valley in 39. Is it possible that 12 to 24 won't verify in this area except for higher elevations? That's a fair question. If the pivot that I'm watching for, this feature right here, if this doesn't pivot over the Hudson River Valley, then you'll likely miss out on that. If it does, you'll see a rapid intensification of your snowfall. So the idea here, let me go back to HRR here. Is that this feature right there, you're going to see your rain continuing. It changes over to snow by around midnight. And then you just keep on going all the way until about 6 p.m. tomorrow. So 12 a.m. midnight to 6 p.m. tomorrow, That's where I'm thinking your snowfall, and I think you're going to get heavier bursts, and that's where I'm pushing for that intense snowfall up here. And again, you're talking about I'm assuming you're right around northwestern Connecticut and well on the northern edge of the forecast area here, right in this area here, because everywhere else you're at 6 to 12. And then down here, this is where, again, you get to see a 3 to 6 and whatnot. All right, let's check out YouTube. Let's see what insane. Holy smokes.
You need to go over your in my backyard policy again.
Oh, yeah. Well, all right, let me put it this way. If you're asking what the snow is going to be in your backyard, you already cursed yourself. Let's see. Good evening, Steve, on Monday night. Steve, how you guys doing? Why wasn't there a lot of rain at the shore? How did most of the snow go for New England? Okay, well, again, it's because the storm is basically developing slightly further east. There was a lot of talk earlier on about the storm developing further west. I don't know where in the hell that came from, but it just isn't reality. It's just, I don't get it. Guys, it ain't going to be the storm you want on the Jersey Shore. I don't know where it's coming from, but I need some coffee. Okay, so on the Jersey Shore, here, let's zoom in here on this. Here's our storm starting to develop, and right now your heavier band is right around Long Island. It was on the immediate Jersey Shore. This is expected to expand and then pivot, and that's also showing up on here. Expands, pivots, and then lifts away. The bulk of our rainfall from this storm has already occurred. Okay? Believe me, I know it's raining pretty heavy out here in Freehold. But from here on out for our storm, I'm not so much concerned about the Jersey Shore in terms of precipitation. My concern now is windy conditions and then slick road conditions tomorrow afternoon and evening as this band drops through. But again, I'm not so much worried about snow accumulation, more just windy conditions and just kind of raw conditions out there. Snow amount in central Connecticut. We got a map for that. I'll just put the map out there. There you go. 40 degrees here in Dolestown, PA. Snow mountains. Let's see. Well, it's not that I don't do it anymore. All right, here's the story with In My Backyard snowfall forecast. Is that I do it for one person that's not a premium member, and then I get like 7,000 emails or 7,000 Twitter posts or posts on here of, what about my backyard? What about my backyard? What about my... And it's like, guys, I got a map. Read the map. The map. It's a beautiful thing. I worked hard on it. And I'm colorblind. I'm impressed the fact that I got all those different colors. Because I have no idea what those colors, what yellow actually looks like. I know what red looks like. But I don't know like what blue looks like. I think it's a beautiful map. So use the map. It's a beautiful thing. And I worked really hard on it. Do you think there will be any more winter storm chances? The southeast ridge is weaker and the MJO is in phase 8. Yeah, the MJO is rapidly weakening though. Let's see here. Here it is. So our MJO, it's incredibly strong. But it's expected to free fall through phase 1, 2, 3, and then head towards a neutral state. We're obviously going to continue to see an active weather pattern. And I strongly expect model guides to continue to put out snow outputs. But just remember a couple of things. We really don't have much of a snowpack over the northern mid-Atlantic. New England's a different story. So these polar air masses are going to try to come in. They're going to moderate really fast. Really fast. And model guidance is going to try to spit out snowfall amounts. But remember what I said. The models do this 850 equals 0, thus snow. But we know better. Look what we experience now. So be very careful in diving into some of that model guidance when it comes to storm potential. But I definitely think we're seeing an active weather pattern. Absolutely. If you're looking for snowfall, I would say that your best potential is the higher the elevation you are, the better chance you got. All right, we got most of the winter. Let's see here. Thundersnow. Thundersnow is definitely a possibility in Connecticut and Massachusetts. Definitely. Yeah. Where do you think the mild air 50s to 60s will return? Good question. I would say end of this month we'll start to see spurts, but I really think April. Mid-April we'll get back more towards near normal. I don't see us above normal, but definitely near normal. Do you cook? Well,
Not really.
I make
We'll
awesome
work on it.
crepes.
We'll work on
I make awesome crepes. I do. And I'm really good. I'm with the new
it.
house.
What's your
We
favorite dish and what's your favorite food?
my
Yeah,
favorite
that's
dish.
too.
All right. Well, that I like to make. I like making omelets.
Yeah,
All right.
that's
But I love a good meaty hamburger. Those are
I
that.
thought you'd say apple crisp.
Well, I mean that's dessert. My favorite dessert is definitely apple crisp. That my wife makes that no one else could beat. Will we get less snow? All right. Let's see here. Is there any chance of LV getting anything? I'm not sure where LV is. Let's see here. New Jersey Transit trains from Trenton or Long Beach around 6 a.m. New Jersey train. All right, here's the thing with New Jersey Transit, right? I don't know what they plan on doing. There's the weather forecast, and then there's whatever logic New Jersey Transit is using. And those two do not always work out together. What I would say is that any type of major wind, any type of major storm impact will lead to delays, but I would expect that more for the northern part of the state than the southern part of the state. So I think that Trenton to Long Branch should be fine, I would think. After the storm, do you see any more potential snow chances? Not for the coastal plain. I really don't. And I know the GFS is trying to show something. I do like the idea of an active weather pattern. I do like the idea of progressive low pressure systems moving through. I just wouldn't trust anything with, precipitation. Yeah, Lehigh Valley, again, this is going to really miss a lot of the Lehigh River Valley. It really is. I mean, on the northern edge, you might, you're in zone 5 there. You might get 1 to 3 inches. All right, but most of this is just is missed out. Let's see here, and we're back to the premium section here, and let's see here. Rain right now in the mid Hudson. Oh, okay. When's the weather lab going to be ready? That's a good question. We're working on it. We are working on it. We actually got the
process.
Yeah, we have the contractors all set up and everything, and
some things that we have to take care of.
Yes.
Some obligations we got to take care of before we can deal with that.
One of the things that I've always promised myself is to no longer worry about power outages. So we're working on that.
Well, I mean, even before we can get that done, we have some obligations we have to take care of.
Yeah,
Before we can get that started.
That's true too. Yep. Wouldn't the storm be closer to New Jersey coast cause more coastal flooding? Who wants that? Some people apparently do. I can't answer that for you. This reminds me of a story where I was forecasting for Sandy, and someone wrote me an email asking, and this was a couple days before Sandy was going to make landfall, that they were really excited about the storm and they were looking forward to its impacts. And this person was a premium member, and I wrote back to him. I'm like, I don't think you know what you're asking, what you're excited about. People are going to lose their homes. People are going to lose their livelihoods or their lives to together, I hope that I'm completely wrong about this storm and it heads out in the Atlantic and no one ever hears from it again. Fortunately, we all know that didn't happen. So the person wrote back to me and says, well, you're just now a weather enthusiast. So I canceled their subscription. I love meteorology. I love a good storm. But I think from my experience as a meteorologist, especially seeing storms like Sandy and experiencing them and understanding the power that they produce, I love a good storm, but I'd rather everyone be safe. And I certainly do not root for massive coastal flooding and storms like that. I think that, let's be honest. The more storms that we have, the more money I make. Let's be honest about that. That's true. So knowing that, when I say I don't see a lot of support for a storm, or I disagree that this is a storm threat, it's not because I want to, hate snow. It's because it is what I see. I'm expecting with the recent rain that plant flowering and growth is going to take off big time. Yeah, it already is in our backyard. That's definitely true. Okay, that answers my questions about the Mets home opener. I was asking about temps. Temps in general, I think, are going to be averaging near to below normal in April, but definitely going to be active. I expect a lot of rainouts for baseball for the start of spring season. See, will fruit farmers have any potential crop issues with plants breaking dormancy? Plants breaking dormancy. Already see cherry trees and daffodils and magnolias. I think there's going to be some issues through March, and I think that backs off. But I would definitely find ways to protect your plants because of the morning lows. Let's see.
Some opinions on YouTube about
I see. Some weather stations are forecasting lower than you. That's cool. I remember when everyone was complaining that I was too low. Oh, jeez. I love it. Can't win. I thought I was too. I thought I was too low. Now I'm too high. I'm learning a lot from you. Your live sections. So cool. Very cool, Larry. I'm glad you are. The whole thing with snow maps, I really do not like making a lot of changes with my snow maps. So I try to avoid it as much as. In fact, I hated the fact that I was changing it this afternoon. But I saw too many factors not to. But I also noticed that there's this theme out there that every time there's a model run or every time there's a model suite, we get a whole suite of new weather forecasts. I don't know. I just don't try to play that game. I got the forecast out. At this point, I'm going to stay with it, see what we verify, see what happens. With the upcoming El Nino, I know it's limits hurricane season, but do you see potential for some homegrown systems that may run the coast? I have no idea. There is so much I have to figure out before even touching on that. All I can tell you is that the basic climatology during El Nino summer, if in fact it actually takes hold by then, is that you have increased shear, which reduces your potential for tropical systems. With that said, remember, Hurricane Andrew happened late in the season. You only need one to cause a lot of damage. So, it could still be an issue. So we'll have to keep an eye on it, as always. If those rains help out the pitching staff get healthy, this applies to the Yankees and Mets, we'll take it for doubleheaders. You know what? I'm excited about my pitching staff. I know what's his name got hurt. He's out for 3 months. But I'm really excited about the young pitchers. I know about the veterans, all that stuff. But I like some of the young pitchers the team has. I'm really excited to see what they could do. So we'll see how that plays out. The maples are already budding in our area. Unfortunately, that means that they are about to be devoured by spotted lanternflies. Yeah, those things are trouble. Hope they get those things under control. Okay, we got 5 minutes to go.
We got another question on YouTube.
And then I'm going to shut down and I'm going to yell at this storm. I'm going to yell. I wonder, there was one person on Discord that was hell-bent on getting snow in central New Jersey. I haven't heard from him since. But I thought maybe he'd show up here. Let's see here. What was your most favorite college course that you took in college? Okay. My favorite and my worst. Okay. My favorite was synoptic meteorology, because that's where we really started to learn how to forecast, and we got challenged by our professor, and it was a lot of fun. Also, dynamic meteorology, if you are up in Oswego, Dr. Scubas. I did not do well in the class. I got like a B in it, which I wasn't happy about. But the math involved in it was really intense. And this professor, Dr. Scubas, he's still there now. I never met a man get so excited and happy about doing a mathematical equation as that guy. And on one hand, I was impressed, but I was also scared. You know? But I really enjoyed the class because I enjoyed his excitement, you know? My worst class happened to be a general education class. It was, women's study. Oh, man. And it was a very intensive feminist teacher. And I wanted to go all the way in the back of the class and just hide, get my assignments in, and graduate. And unfortunately, this teacher wanted to put me up in the front and ask me a bunch of questions all the time about every topic. And I was like, I'm a young Catholic male. There is nothing I could say here that would end up good.
Decided to railroad you.
Yeah, that was fun. That was an interesting class. And I was like, I don't want to have an argument. I just want to pass and go graduate. So that was a rough one. And because I'm Italian, I love to argue. And I warned the teacher, I'm like, you don't understand. She's like, oh, were you in debating class? I'm like, no, at the time I was in my 20s, I have 20 years of arguing for every holiday. This is not going to end well for either one of us. But it is what it is. Surprise state of emergency is in so much of northern New Jersey. I don't get it myself. I really don't get it. During Sandy, my ship was anchored south of Coney Island, waiting for New York Harbor to reopen. Yeah, that was rough. And you know, the thing is that, like, that class that I don't like talking politics, right? Because no matter what you say, you have a 50% chance of pissing someone off.
Well, that was a class you shouldn't have even been in the first place. It didn't have anything to do with
my major,
studying or
right?
anything.
But it was like one of those things you had to take a certain
Yeah,
gen
it
A
was a
class.
forced kind of thing.
Ridiculous nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No business being there in
Yeah.
the first place.
Let's see here. Looks like SPC has severe risk out for 4 days in usual parts of Texas and Oklahoma. Sign of severe season to come? Yeah, I definitely think so. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm dead. Well, it's true. I had no business being in that class. Although I did.
What does it have to do with meteorology?
Well, no. The best part about it was that I took, and again, this was in around 2001. So I took the themes from WWE to compare that to a work of literature that we had to read, and I had to try to find comparisons in the real world. So I used WWE, and I nearly got thrown out of the class, but I got an A on it because the teacher had to give it to another teacher to grade because of bias and whatnot. I ended up getting an A in the class because I wrote the paper and I was able to successfully prove the cross section of what was in the book to the themes in WWE. What you could think of with a whole bag of chocolate covered coffee beans and determination, you'll never know.
I'm thinking of the movie PCU.
Yes.
Where he says you can major in Game Boy if you know how to
No
bullshit.
Right, exactly. Would be even worse now than it was back then. Yeah, I'm not even touching that. No way. I'd be in so much trouble if I was in college right now. Because logic. No. Thank God I would not ever go back to college. No way. Not in that environment. All right, so let me touch on a few things before we head on out. We have our low pressure system intensifying. Notice how this is starting to expand like a V, right? You see this V here? You can match it up really nicely with our water vapor. There's our V. There's our upper level low. There's our subtropical low, or subtropical shortwave. As these interact, there's the V right here. And there's the representation there. I bet you we can find it in here. Okay. This is at 250 millibars. There's your V right there. 500 millibars. Even more so. 850 millibars. There's your stretching. And there's your shift to our low pressure system starting to take hold over the coastal waters. So our storm is evolving as expected, pretty much going along with what we're expecting with the forecast. As this cold air rushes in, this edge right here is the edge of our cold air. Notice, here's our trough. Now, let's go to 850 millibars. Again, this is 850 millibars. Let's zoom in. And this is where we're going to close out for tonight because this is really cool, okay? Here is -6 degrees Celsius. Here is our trough, nearly identical. As this trough crashes towards the coastal waters, this storm is going to blow up. And as that's happening, all this precipitation, that's a wintry mix of rain and snow and all this glop, is going to change over to a cement-like snow. And that is when you're going to see all this accumulation that we're expecting verify with this intense precipitation. And it's all going to be focused around New England, especially southern and central New England, and off towards the Poconos and Catskills. And that it's starting to take shape, and you're going to start to see these temperatures fall as a result of that. So overall, the forecast is evolving as expected. That's it for tonight. I think we're going to shut it down. Let's see here. I got 4 credits for the weather, and there were a lot of girls. Better than cutting frogs. I like to argue too. Yeah. Once again, Lakewood, New Jersey gets screwed. Well, I mean, it's Lakewood, New Jersey. I mean, it wasn't going to be your storm anyway. It was a depressing winter, I agree. I can't argue that. So, that's it for tonight. I am going to go relax a little bit, get off the internet. I've been on here since about 4 a.m. So I am going to take a rest. I will see everyone next week at 8 p.m. at Wednesday. And as always, stay safe out there.